Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome. Dawson County Board of Commissioners voting session. Today is August 19th, 2021. Appreciate everyone that's in attendance as well as those who are with us online. First, I'll need a motion to come out of executive session. Motion by Commissioner Fawcett. Seconded by Commissioner Gaines. Discussion. Hearing none, please vote. And that is approved 4-0. We are out of executive session. We'll begin with the roll call. And as you can see, we're all here. I would ask you to briefly stand for invocation and pledge. If you would bow your heads, please. Our dear gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you for this another day and for the many blessings of life. We ask for knowledge and wisdom to carry out the business of this county. Anything that's accomplished will give you the honor and glory in Christ's name. We do ask and pray. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Announcements. Do we have any announcements? Any announcements? We'll move on to the approval of the minutes. First up, we have the minutes of the work session held on August the 5th, 2021. Any additions or deletions? Motions. Motion by Commissioner Satterfield, seconded by Commissioner Dooley. Discussion. Hearing none, please vote. And those are approved 4-0. Next up, we have the minutes of the voting session held on August 5th, 2021. Any additions or deletions? Motions. Motion by Commissioner Fawcett, seconded by Commissioner Gaines. Discussion. Hearing none, please vote. And those are approved 4-0. Next, we'll move on to the approval agenda. I do have a couple of additions to the agenda. Number 8, under new business, will be uses of American Rescue Plan funding. Some of the things we talked about earlier today. And number 9, letters of support for grant funding for ETC, Etowah Water and Sewer, and Windstream in reference to some grants that they are applying for. With that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda with those changes. Motion by Commissioner Fawcett. Second by Commissioner Gaines. Discussion. Hearing none, please vote. And that is approved 4-0 with the 2 changes. No one signed up for public comment in this particular section. We'll move on to the public hearings. First up, we have possible extension of existing moratorium on the acceptance for approval of final subdivision plats that create new roads. Jameson. Talk loud.
So we are asking you to have like a mute everybody.
Okay. Any questions for Jameson about the request for an extension? Any questions for Jameson? Thank you, sir. All right, at this time, I'll open up that hearing. Is there anyone here to speak on the possible extension of the existing moratorium on the acceptance of approval for final subdivision plats and create new roads? Anyone here to speak on the possible extension of the existing moratorium on the acceptance of for approval of final subdivision plats that create new roads. Anyone? Seeing none, I'll close that hearing. This is the first of the only hearing that we have to have. What's the pleasure of the board? Wait, hold on. No, for possible extension of existing moratorium. Come on. You didn't understand what I said, so I'll give you the chance. Okay, go ahead. In a public hearing, you can speak for or against. Okay, go ahead. Give us, I know who you are, but give us your name and address so that they know, and write it on that sheet right there. Thank you. All right. One more time, in case anyone else didn't understand how I put it. Possible extension of existing moratorium on the acceptance for approval of final subdivision plats that create new roads. Anyone else? Seeing none, I'll close that hearing. What's the pleasure of the board?
Based on Jameson's comment, we need more information, correct? Yes. So we should be prepared to do that within approximately 14 days. September 2nd. We also have an option.
Got it done sooner, is that what you're saying?
Other information needed? Motions?
So are you asking for a table?
No, be an extension of the moratorium.
Okay, so- I mean, I think I understand the comments of Mr. Turner, and I can appreciate the position they're in. However, I also think that it's our role and responsibility as elected officials to make sure we have all the information to properly make the proper decision. So it would be my recommendation that we extend it in order that we have the proper information to make the right decisions. That's
45 days.
correct.
All right, we have a motion to extend for 45 days from Commissioner Gaines. Second from Commissioner Fawcett. Discussion. Other discussion.
session, we can move it to that night.
Yes. Yes,
Could be the second. September second.
yes. Okay, none of them are, only mine. Those are all green. Okay. All right. Any further discussion? Got a motion second, hearing none, please vote. And that extension is approved 4-0, and like you said, can be changed by the board at any time once they're satisfied with that. All right, we'll move on to the second public hearing, which is the timber harvest ordinance update, the first of one hearing. Timber harvest update. Jameson brought that to us. That had to do with some changes that the state had made, and we were trying to get in line, our ordinance in line with the state, so that we would be together. Anything you want to add to that, Jameson, before I open the hearing? Okay, all right. So I'll open this hearing. Is there anyone here to speak on the timber harvest ordinance update? Anyone here speak on the timber harvest ordinance update? Come on up.
Property owner in Dawson County, 1,000 acres. Got timber property, I read your regulation. About how plan to identify road damage, arbitrary, when you got it laid out. That road to be damaged by a school bus, a tractor trailer, bringing something to a restaurant or the supermarket or anything else. And how are you going to go and identify that timber hauler damaged that road? Everything I object to about that is that the property owners pay taxes in this county, we pay for the roads just like everybody else, but it seems like we're being singled out because we're emergency. Don't do anything for it, right? Tax on top of our property taxes.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak on the timber harvest ordinance update? Anyone else? Seeing none, I'll close that hearing. What's the pleasure of the board? Okay,
The changes in this was to get it in line with the state's regulations.
That's everything that we are adopting, basically.
Right, that's like that.
Adopting it, therefore,
Only change was like changes.
Would you say what the changes are? That might help.
Expanded language as far as bonds, letters of credit. As a record, what to do. Additionally, it's counties within the charge no permit, including a driveway permit, to be required from the person or for an application in the property operation. Clarify that now.
enforcement looks at this?
That's what it is.
So as far as the road, for us to make a claim, timber harvester, and, public works, look at it before anything starts. You know, the scope of that entrance. Anything happens right there. That's where it's going. Is that what you're talking about? That's basically what the trucks in the road. Under this one, right? Is that
Entrance and exit, there's other damage.
On that road.
Yeah, that would be anybody.
That's right.
You know, that would fall under normal. Not damage the road, it's not possible.
It went from 1,000 to 1,500, is that what you said?
Yes.
And as far as the taxing of timber, I know it's taxing 100%. That's not just us. It's not just this county.
No.
And it's, I've been where you've been. I know what you're talking about, being taxed, you know, wait 25 years to harvest and then, and I get that. And if something's wrong with the road, you will be blamed for it. Been there and done that. Been there and done it. Okay, what section is that? Do you know the section, Mike? Yeah. Yeah, let's see, what
So
is
it's a
it?
map that area that identifies the location of harvested. And that's those trucks that travel to and from the factory, for purposes of getting those products that they want to egress, subtract from the public road. And it's different from main one. That's subject to track public. There's multiple points of egress. Or so really what we're looking for is a map that shows like track where you're looking to timber harvest and the points of egress to that is access to the lab.
Would that not be on the computers? I mean, is that something you can just pull up and say, this is it?
It's like that.
We have can you, further definition of timber harvesting is there a minimum number of acres? So let's just say I have an acre and I want to timber harvest my acre. Does that mean I have to go get a $5,000 bond if I'm just doing an acre or if I'm doing 10,000 acres? Do we have any variation between the two sizes? I didn't see anything. I'm just curious if there's a definition of timber harvesting.
That's what I thought. It's something that's already there. Don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Other questions for Jameson? Motions.
Motion to approve the Tim Harvest or update. Live study, align with study.
A motion by Commissioner Satterfield. Seconded by Commissioner Dooley. Discussion. Hearing none, please vote. And that is approved 4-0. Next public hearing we have is the capital improvements element annual update. Jameson presented that to us a couple weeks ago. It's something we have to do every year. So, and there's a couple of, there's a resolution and one other document that has to be as part of that. So the letter of transmittal and the resolution. All right. Okay. All right, so we'll open up that hearing. Is there anyone here to speak on the capital improvements element annual update? Anyone here to speak on the capital improvements element annual update? Anyone? Seeing none, I'll close that hearing. What's the pleasure of the board? I will remind you, there's two documents that we need to approve.
I make a motion that we approve the capital improvements element annual update. And
Letter of transmittal and the resolution. Okay, motion by Commissioner Gaines. Seconded by Commissioner Dooley. Discussion. Hearing none, please vote. And that is approved. Next up, we have the Georgia 400 and Highway 53 corridor guidelines. This is the second of two hearings. First hearing was held at the August 17th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. And I will say this is a process that has been going on for quite a while to get to here. So Jameson, if you would come up and kind of give the background up until now.
Probably 2 years.
Close to it.
So how did we get here? We actually started in 2019 with a recommendation from so the Long Range Planning Committee. Am I on now? Hey,
Yeah.
there we go. Look at that.
Got mine.
turn it back up.
Get it back.
Just request to turn it like you want to be on. And I'll fix it. You can continue.
Go ahead, James.
All right. It's on.
Go ahead.
So we're discussing the 453 corridor study. I guess it started in 2019 with the Long Range Planning Committee. Several meetings, they discussed updating the 400 corridor and also adding the Highway 53 corridor as a new ordinance.
Talk into it.
All right, so where was I? So the board then directed staff in 2019 to start the corridor study, in which we outsourced to Ms. Patterson and her team. They've done an excellent job working with us and working with the citizens through this process. See, phase one of the project was where we met with our consultants, and we pretty much cast the vision.
as to what we would like to see the 400 corridor be upgraded to, as well as what we would like to see the 53 corridor be adopted as. Phase 2, we kicked it off with a public participation in this meeting, this room right here. We had great participation. We also sent that out via Zoom, which was interesting because that was our first public hearing via Zoom. We had a great turnout from that. That was in early 2020, I believe. Yes, that was right after we lifted right after we lifted the ability to have public hearings, because we were under a moratorium for public hearings for a short stint in 2020. And when we came out of that, that's when we really kicked everything off. We moved into stakeholder interviews in which we reached out to multiple large landowners, businesses up and down 53 and 400. We talked to everyone from real estate agents to business owners to property owners. And we got a lot of great feedback. From that, we developed a strategy plan where we had a survey that got sent out that was done by several people. I would say it was well over 100 people. So 800. Sorry, we've done a couple surveys since then, but there was a great turnout with that as well. So we moved into the process of phase 3, where we developed our final draft with all the comments and concerns up and down 53 and 400. We took that back that was drafted alongside an economic development plan and a trails plan. We're trying to make sure that all of our ordinances are aligned and focused in the same direction, along with the Chamber of Commerce, the Development Authority. Everyone took a look at this document and made their revisions. We took it back to the Long Range Planning Committee, which I believe y'all received an email of support from the chairman of that committee today. And finally, it moved to public hearing. And the public hearing process is part of the contract that we have with PNC Studios and Lynn Patterson. We had our first meeting on Tuesday, public hearing on Tuesday, which the Planning Commission unanimously voted to move forward with it. They did have a couple comments that we addressed through that. At this point, we moved to this public hearing that Lynn is about to present the document before the Board of Commissioners. Y'all can choose to accept the document, or if y'all want to further discuss it, we can move it to the next work session and make some changes. And we'll want to get this right before we approve it and move forward with it. I'll entertain any questions before I turn it over to Lynn for her presentation.
Questions for Jameson? Thank you, sir.
Good evening. Ooh, you can hear me, can't you? There you go. I'm Dr. Lynn Patterson. I'm with 3 Points Planning. I've been working in concert with BNC Studio and Thomas and Hutton on this project. It's actually a welcome rematch, if you will. We had started the project a number of years ago. It got shelved, and we're back on it. And we've really enjoyed, I think, most of all, the coordination piece, as Jameson mentioned. I know many of you through the Economic Development Plan and the Greenways Plan, and making sure that all of these pieces work in concert with each other. I'm going to try to keep my comments to about 15 minutes. I know you've got a full agenda. If that, I'm going to do my very best because there's a lot to digest. I want to hit the highlights for you, answer any questions. And so we'll just kind of walk through, if you don't mind. The next, do I have a clicker? Oh, I do have a clicker. Sorry, wrong one. There we go. Okay. I don't have to do the planning process anymore. Jameson just did that. Thank you very much. I do want to go over the goals of the overlay district, which were actually, as he mentioned, through this public participation process, through examination of your planning documents, through many conversations we've had over time, as well as I mentioned some of those other plans that we've been working on to have a document that is going to encourage development, but guide development. So we're not trying to, thwart development. I just came up here again today from Atlanta in the rain. And it's, it's the development is certainly moving this way very quickly. And it's important to have a guiding document to help direct that development. So we'll talk about those, look at the boundaries. Those have changed a little bit. The 400 boundaries have changed, and obviously the state route 53 are new boundaries. I want to look at some images. I'm not going to get deep into the code, but what we've done in this instance is we've actually created an inspiration or a pattern book for the planning department to have in their office. So when a developer comes in, they can see it. We didn't want something to be so homogeneous that it felt cookie cutter. You know, we didn't want anything to be forced, but we have the guidelines of the materials and, you know, general architectural principles and general site design guidelines, but then images that help to direct that. So we'll go through both 453 on that, and then obviously any comments or questions, feel free to stop me as needed. The planning commission meeting had some good suggestions. That we had a couple of typos that we need to finalize in the document. But I do want to mention this now as applicable when I get to the applicability section about when these overlay districts are applicable into what cases. So please make sure I do that. We've got the overlay goals for 400. The idea is that as you're coming north, that it's a distinct sense of place. You have arrived in Dawson County. It is just not a continuation of 400, but you have come to a place that has a great deal of community pride, a great deal of community identity, and we want that reflected in the architecture and the site layouts and the types of activities along this section for 400. To allow a mix of uses, including more intense commercial, industrial, and higher density residential. If you're going to have high density residential, you want to keep it in certain spots. We've talked about this as part of the economic development plan. This supports those same goals. Design auto and multimodal pedestrian friendly sites that link to future greenways and green spaces. Same thing. Again, we're trying to say, how do we move visitors and residents and workers throughout the community, not just by automobile? It's tough. 400. It's a very, very quick moving, you know, you're going at, I know you're supposed to be going at 65, but people are going at 70, 75 miles an hour. But how do we create a reason for people to slow down and to spend some time in alternate ways of moving throughout the space? Create mini destinations and outdoor venues. It's one of those things, again, that we found out in both plans. People wanted someplace to go. Never more than during the pandemic have we identified the need for outdoor space, for gathering spaces, for places to build community. That's lacking right now. We've got traditional strip mall development, but how do we create those and augment those? And I'll show you some images for that, which is the next one, enhancing that strip mall development and then standardizing signage. So when we start to standardize and look at similar themes for architecture and signage, you start to feel that sense of place. The 53 goals are a little bit different, right? That's still a main corridor that takes you from the lake all the way up here into Dawsonville, crosses 400. What does that look like? We're thinking of that much more as where it is developed is more as a village-like setting. So not the 70 miles an hour. Can you slow down long enough to stop and hit some retail and other activities and commercial activities, but rather how do we create these spaces that will likely be a lot more for locals as well as visitors to the community. So we're looking at transitioning from high intensity commercial through rural areas into downtown Dawsonville and likewise toward the lake. Allow a mix of uses, retail, commercial, and medium density residential. Maybe it's townhomes along there, right? So not high density, but medium density residential. Think smaller scale. Encourage more intensive development at intersections. This is what we're trying to create, being able to utilize those side streets. Encourage front and side yard landscaping. We can use landscaping not only as an aesthetic, but also as screening, right? To create visual interest, to create interaction, opportunities for interaction. Landscape can be screening, it can be sidewalks, it can be fences, it can start to define areas. Encourage residential developments to access side streets when possible and buffered rear lots from public view. We don't want to look at the back of, if you have a wonderful development going in, I don't know that you want to see the back of somebody's house, right? So we've encouraged some landscape buffers between 53 and the back of those lots. So they have their own sort of identity and seclusion that's off of 53, and then they would have, signage to it for entrance into the development and standardizing signage. The overlay district boundaries. We actually, in some areas along 400, we expanded it a little bit and we tucked it back a little bit as well. So what I want, I think, to be clear is the most important thing is what you're seeing from the corridor. We added some pieces because we think they are logical for when you have assemblage. So a parcel may or may not be when buildings actually in front or the sites in front 400, then they would be required to meet the standards. If it's not in fronting, it doesn't have to. We do not have single family residential architectural requirements. That's not essential. That's not important. We do have it on the commercial buildings. We do want in fronting buildings facing 400. And I'll walk through some of those. So those are the 400 boundaries. We went through those changes at that Zoom public meeting. That's the one where we talked about the change in boundaries. That was that last spring. And then the 53 corridor, again, goes from your southeastern boundary up to just before Dawsonville. It's a little wider. Again, the parcels that are going to be impacted are going, and the elements are really the street side. But we wanted to make sure that we encompass as much as we could, especially when it gets into some site design, minimizing grading, for example, only where required. But we're really trying, again, in concert with the economic development plan and the greenways plan to really, how do we create these boundaries to support, what's the zoning code to support those initiatives? So the 400 overlay district, the planning principles for that, I'll walk through them very quickly. The idea is that, again, buildings and entrances should in front or face 400 or internal streets. Sometimes if you've got a deep development, we want them to be on the street. Why? Because we want to allow, for example, pedestrians to come from a sidewalk or a multimodal pathway to come in and be able to cross safely. We'll look at some examples of that. Curb cuts should be limited and access when possible should use side streets. Landscape buffers should screen and or minimize impact of parking, service areas, and storage. Grading should be limited. This is a much shorter version of what's in the code. Open space and green space connections to greenway are encouraged. Public art is encouraged, not required, but encouraged, as are green building techniques and certifications. So in a movement toward that, we don't want this to be, again, we want to encourage community development and community investment without it becoming so cumbersome that it would drive someone away. But these are some examples of what, and I'll point, you certainly can look at the diagram that's in the code. The images are what is in that inspiration or pattern book. The idea here is when we look at site design, on your right-hand side of that graphic is 400. You see there's some, if it's a deep parcel, for example, you've got some out parcels, you've got some streets that cross through, you've got some sort of medium density parcels, and then maybe your main anchor. What you'll see about the site design is that we are trying to create interest along the street, along 400, but also recognizing through parking bays. And a great example of this is actually your Kroger development. That whole development marketplace does a good job of sort of segmenting that, creating some very clear, very aesthetically pleasing, you can certainly maneuver around there in a very, I think, efficient way, but it's also very safe. So and you can see from the examples, whenever possible, if we can put some treatments in the sidewalks, in the crosswalks, if there are opportunities to create green spaces, we do that. This is an example of a cross section of a collector street, which would be one of those internal streets off of 400. And so you'll see that there are sidewalks, multimodal. Those could be wider. They could be multi-use pathways with some landscaping, some trees. We do believe that trees are important, But we also recognize that these are likely a lot of retail and we don't want to screen the retail, but it does augment and you'll see from the parking lots examples what that can do. I always say when I come here, I always try to find the parking space underneath the tree, keep my car nice and cool, and there's never seemed to be enough of those trees. Here's some examples of what that might look like, some of our parking lots. And the treatments in there where you've got the sidewalk, the landscape strip, and then the parking. We are trying to encourage, there will be parking in the front of these, of course, but how do you buffer that a little bit? How do you create that sort of safety and that visual interest? You have a lot of right of way going up 400 that has some potential to be used in a number of ways. How do we create that buffer? There is some industry that could be placed along 400. And we're really looking at that as how do you place that away? There would be internal streets. Where do you place the industrial buildings? How do those relate? How do you limit some of the activities? I'll show you some examples in a moment. You still have an industrial street with parking out front, sidewalks, street trees, hedging, et cetera, to separate those uses. I'd like to get to some of the pictures. I think they do a pretty good job of it. I mentioned the parking lots, good amount of street trees without being too many, good landscape requirements along the property line. We've outlined what those requirements are as well. Our pedestrian access, we believe, is very important within the developments as much as anything else. You don't want folks to have to get in their cars and move from one side of the strip mall to the other necessarily, the development. How do we move them safely throughout the sites? And so we've identified those opportunities. These are some examples of our open space that we're trying to encourage. I'll show you a little bit later. There's a development down by where I live that they invested a lot of money into revamping the parking lot, and they have incorporated some of these elements so people can do outdoor dining. They can go get the ice cream and sit someplace, right? They have someplace to go. Can or cannot? Oh, sorry.
You want to come up closer? Come on up.
I promise I don't bite. I do. So, and then that brings us to signage. So the signage that we're looking for or recommending is all freestanding signs should be monument style signs, which will be constructed of the same or architecturally compatible materials with the principal building, right? So that there's some relationship. They need to substantially incorporate 3 elements: wood, timber, or brick. We're not saying, any design necessarily, no particular design. These are inspirational to encourage it. But again, we don't want the same sign over and over again. We want to allow for some, but we want this to be a very defined and identifiable signage along there. The next are just some examples, architectural examples. So, the businesses want to come in. What are some of the things that you'd be looking for? I'm not going to go through them all, but these are all about materials. You can kind of see awnings, making sure that there's a certain amount of that architectural material on the design. We're not allowing, metal front buildings. They definitely have to be, wood, brick, stone, faced concrete block, fiber cement, cementitious lap siding, etc. Some more examples of maybe some office buildings that you may see. These are again, the code is what's in the white, and it talks about having a change in texture or color, having a change in pattern or material. We looked at fenestration requirements as well to make sure you had enough windows. One of the most striking things about Dawson County is its natural environment. You want windows so that people can be inside and see out, as much as making sure that the buildings themselves are attractive as well. We talk about scenic vistas as well in the code. We talk about breaking up facades so you don't have sort of this one big monolith or homogeneous front. And again, some sort of inspirational images that would be required. There's the fenestration comment. Or code section of the code. We even talk about column bases. It seems fairly minor, but it definitely can make an impact. Our industrial, I really like this image of industrial because it says you can have industrial and it doesn't have to look bad. This is a brewery. So all the activity happens on the backside of it, but the front side is brick. There is an office component. As you'll also see here, we talk about office building, the office having to be in the front of the building, have a certain level of fenestration. We do allow for tilt, precast concrete, only in the industrial developments, and making sure we're breaking that up with some fenestration with some windows. Multifamily, multifamily I know has been, there's a lot of interest in multifamily, and if you're going to have it, you want to make sure it's well done. And some of that is by varying materials, and that way you provide some visual interest. I'm going to skip over to the 53. We okay with that? So just looking at I can't read all the way up there. I have to read down here. The commercial buildings and entrances, again, some of this is going to feel familiar. The difference, a lot of the difference is scale. Remember, village setting, right? Residential developments and industrial developments shall face internal streets. Note I said residential developments. The applicability of these overlay districts are as such. If you have a new development, whether it's on 400 or 53, it has to meet the standards, okay? Any investment over 50% of the building value has to come into compliance with the standard. 50% of the building value, if you're going to improve it by 50%. Single family residential lots, not as part of a subdivision, but it does not have to come into compliance. This is not what this is about. This is about commercial development and large scale residential development. So I think that's an important, and that's a distinction. We had the conversation with Planning Commission about the other night, and I think it was a very good one. It was never our intention to do that, and it was great that it was brought up so that we
Excuse me, can you
could.
clarify? I guess you were on that subject, but
Yes,
existing
single family.
any existing commercial, residential, industrial existing. Does it have to be? The only time it has to be brought up to standards is 50% of the value.
Of the building value. So, right.
But if it's existing, you
It's
don't have to do anything.
existing and they don't change it. It's with the exception of refuse with dumpsters. That's the only exception. And we can talk about that in a moment. Refuse containers that are out in front. There's a 24-month period that they have to come into compliance for screening. So large dumpsters, but a single family house that has a garbage can out front, that's not of concern in this overlay district. But you're right. Any existing building development does not have to come into compliance with these standards unless they make a change of 50% or more of the value of the building. Okay. Yep. Good question. Let's see. Again, things about curb cuts. What we're trying to do here too, it all depends on topography. But if we can move buildings a little bit closer to the street versus 400, where you have that huge right of way, the speeds are of such that you don't want buildings close to the street. But coming up 53, over time, that's going to develop. We want to see that come in a little bit where it's topographically feasible. And I'll show you some examples. It's not required, but it does. This is something that we're encouraging. Limiting grading, public art, green building techniques, green space, all of those things are key to this. Here are the boundaries for the proposed overlay district. You can see 400 cuts right through it, and that's okay. For the 400 cut has the precedent for it. Here's some examples. This is what we call the rural section. There's no development right up here. We're not going to ask for a sidewalk. There's no sense in having a sidewalk in an area where there's nothing happening, right? No sense in doing that. The village section, let's say you do have something where it's starting to creep a little bit closer. Then we do want to see the opportunity for a sidewalk and for connectivity from that sidewalk in. So maybe as you start to sort of see the infill, they can be moving between developments. We've got a retail center. This is an example at an intersection, what that might look like. Important piece here is with parking, we're looking at one bay of parking between the street and the buildings. The rest of the parking you tuck around behind, right? This is, we wouldn't never be this close to the street, but at least you can see on the top one what some of that architecture might look like. The other on the bottom, it's an example, that's a restaurant on the bottom. You could argue, you know, it'd be great to have some offices. You could even have some residential up top, just depending. That's the kind of look, that's the kind of image I think that has been expressed to us through this process, throughout this entire process. Looking at fences, fences can do a really nice job delineating an area. And so if, you know, we have regulations for fences, if you want to put a fence up, these are the kinds of fences we'd like to see, the board style fences. Parking lots, again, parking lots with landscaping, parking lots that have perimeter landscaping as well as interior tree islands. We've got pedestrian access versus via sidewalks and multi-use pathways would be provided along State Route 53 as indicated to those sections, depending on how you're developing. These are some examples that we have of what, if you start to see, this is pretty intense development, but you can start to see if you have something that's going to go back, that's a larger development that's maybe a block or two in, you'd have these wider sidewalks. These areas where you're encouraging that gathering space. Again, here's an example of these gathering spaces that would be incorporated. You can see in the bottom left-hand corner, maybe there's an amphitheater somebody puts in. Anything's possible and encouraged. This is that development that I was telling you about where they actually took part of the parking lot out. They put in a turf section where you can go play cornhole, or they pull ping pong tables out, kids roll in that turf. Not sure why, but they do. There's a little splash park, there's seating. These are the kinds of things we'd like to see in strip mall development, right? Some active outdoor spaces that encourage people to come as a destination. Some examples of some of the commercial that we're talking about. The first one is actually out of Dawson. But these sort of low two-story buildings, you might have some depth to them. Maybe there's a couple deep, but we're not looking at 4 or 5 stories, nothing like that along 53, the more maybe 2-story buildings with some interest. Even some that look a little bit like a number of houses, right, that have been redeveloped. You've got some already that sort of look like this, and we absolutely encourage that. And when you look at the site design and the layout, again, sort of creating some nice internal circulation to that. Goal is not to keep putting them out onto 53 over and over again, but to try to do as much interparcel access as possible. Again, we have principal areas of a building. Here are some more images from our inspiration, our pattern book. Our industrial buildings, we do not like the top left. That's an example of where the service bays are located on the front, although you do have a little bit of a lobby or an office area. Nobody seemed to like that slope roof, and that's okay. I'm not advocating for slope roofs, but you can sort of see from some of the others where you have some fenestration that cuts and doesn't make something look quite so industrial. And then our medium density residential, if you will, along 53 is something more along the lines of townhomes, patio homes. There's a great deal of interest I see all over the state, frankly, and all over the Southeast, with a lot of people not wanting yards, not wanting to have the large tracts, and there are ways in which to do that. So I wanted to provide some images. Again, signage, wood, timber, or brick, lower. Obviously, it's a smaller signage, but there is some consistency and that you have those elements in there. And so that is all I have. I tried to walk through that as quickly as possible. Zoning codes can be kind of boring, but I think images probably help that some. Thank you.
Questions for Ms. Patterson? Or James, either one. Questions for Ms. Patterson or James?
Just a comment, I guess, it's tough to see. I mean, we want to encourage businesses, and we want to take hurdles away from businesses coming to Dawson County. some of the things that I'm looking through, it's a lot to digest. There's a lot of controls that are in place that, to me, are somewhat a little bit micromanaging the development per se. And I'm concerned that I know there's an example years ago, I think Cracker Barrel wanted to come here. We probably all heard that. And because of some of the constraints and the hurdles that were too high, they went down the road. And so, just speaking for myself, I think that we need to dive very deep in making sure that these hurdles are not detrimental to encouraging business growth and development. Because if you look at our digest, we're very fortunate to have retail base in Dawson County that supports and allows us to keep our property taxes down. If we and I don't want to set the standards too high, because we want high standards. I think it's a balancing act. And you just got to be very careful with this, I would say. It's very in-depth and good knowledge. I know you picked up a lot from a lot of community members. But for me personally, I just need more time to digest goods and the areas that I have concern.
That was definitely the Cracker Barrel comment was, how do we design something that, or how do we create standards that wouldn't scare away, but still have some, they still are part of the community. I think that's important. Yep, good question, good comment.
Yeah, I agree with you, Chris, that it's a lot to take in, and I'm not for anything that's going to be retroactive on, even if it's just a dumpster. I can't support anything that somebody's been there making them change what they've been doing. I don't see that. And it'd be hard for me to support that, anything that was retroactive in this. I'm fine with us establishing some standards that's going to take us through the next 20 or 30 years to kind of get the area that looks, more uniform. But I don't want anything that's going to be detrimental to current property owners at all. And along Chris's lines too, about the time to look at this, I would like to take, we're going to be having a new planning director before long, and whoever that is, I would like for them to take a look at it before we made any kind of, decision as to how this, because they're going to be the ones that's going to be enforcing and interpreting and everything else, and they need to have input on this as well. It's just kind of the way that it fell when it was finished. I know it's been a long process, but I would hate to try to make a decision on it quickly when we could allow him, he or she, to take a look at it as well. Those are just my thoughts.
And that's something we can definitely do. The board can make their decision on whether they want to move forward tonight or they want to table for a future date in reference to that after we have the hearing. So yeah, that's something that's easily done. Any other?
And there are some, a good many spots in here where the planning director can use his or her discretion. I noticed that, so if somebody said, well, I just can't quite do this, we could go into a meeting and, discuss it with that person. So I like that part.
I think
It wasn't written in stone.
that's what we want, to be
Yeah.
able to avoid the Cracker Barrel,
Right. Right.
incident. I would have, loved to have that. I'm sure my waistline wouldn't like it, but I hate that. It's unfortunate anytime you lose a business due to aesthetics.
I do want to hear from people.
Sure.
So many times these things come up and we approve it, and then you hear it after it's already done. So I'd rather hear it on the front side. And it's out here for people to see, and people that do developments and all. I don't understand the implications of all this. I just know if something looks good and I like it and it looks neat and, it's inviting, I understand that. But all these measurements and all that, I don't get it. And I don't know what it does to their bottom line. I'm sure it cuts, it cuts to the chase pretty much. So, and they have to worry about the money part of it. I get it, but, I want to hear from people what they think.
And it's a burden that a developer does have to overcome. And it's, nobody likes to be told what to do with their property, what they can't do with their property. But at the same sense, I think also it's important to have, we have zoning regulations and
Mhm.
laws. So there's a reason for consistency in trying to ensure that we do have development 20, 30, 40 years down the road that is not hodgepodge and doesn't make sense at all. So, I mean, I get the macro level, but the micro can get a little too much for me sometimes. But good information.
Other questions? Ms. Patterson? Thank you, man.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, at this time, I'll open up this hearing on the Georgia 400 and Highway 53 corridor guidelines. It's the second of two hearings. The first hearing was held on August 17th at the Planning Commission meeting. Anyone here to speak? Come on up. Give us your name and your address and please sign in.
I'll talk loud enough so everybody can hear me, but I think y'all need to spend some money on the audio system instead of paying somebody like that to spend our tax dollars. But my name's David Turner. I've lived here 65 years. I've lived all my life within 3 miles of this courthouse. And I don't want to call this guy out, but I think me and my family are the largest landowners on 53 Highway. He has never spoken to me. Now, he just told y'all a story. I've never spoke to that guy about this situation. And that's misinforming our commissioners. And I've heard you say many times at these hearings that you like living in Dawson County and you like the country and you like the countryside of it. I like the countryside. The people that come up here because they love it. Then they want to change it. I don't want change. If they don't like it, the road goes out as fast as it comes in. The only thing that I don't like is the speed limit, the way it's entrapment for y'all to make more revenue. As you come down Gober Hill, you can run 55 miles an hour, but yet when you get to the top, you got to slow down because state patrols makes plenty of money for y'all running their speed trap. And every one of y'all know it. But I've been in the grading business 47 years. I've worked for a lot of people. Arthur Blank, the Woodruffs at Coca-Cola. I built 20 houses on Tuxedo Drive. I've done about 80% of Country Club of the South houses, $1 million, $2, $3, $4, $5 million houses. And we hire somebody from Atlanta to come up here and tell us how they want it to be up here in the country. And they can't even fix the problems they got down there. This is a disgrace to the people of this county who has toted it from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, 2000, 2010. And you want people like that to come up here and tell us that we need big buildings that are ugly? Every one of y'all have just admitted what a sin y'all made. Y'all didn't make it. It wasn't y'all, but by not getting Cracker Barrel here. They told y'all we don't build brick buildings, we build country stores. This is a country county. There's pastures, there's horses, there's cows on 53. It looks pretty good to me. Why can't we keep it that way? We don't need high-rise buildings. Before y'all make a decision like this, I think you need a lot of input from the property owners and the homeowners of this county. And if you'll look back through there, I bet half the people here ain't talked to this guy or knew anything about it. Some of you commissioners didn't know about some of this stuff. So where is our tax dollars being spent under the table. I mean, we need to know what's going on, especially this. This could make Dawson County or break it. I mean, everybody flocks to our outlet mall. And we've made a good living off of it. And I couldn't praise y'all for bringing it here. But at the end of the day, then people go back home, and I like that. They come spend their money with us.
Everybody has 5 minutes. When in the
Is my
public-
5 minutes up?
Your 5 minutes is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak? Come on up. Give us your name and your address, and please sign in, and you will have 5 minutes.
Hello, my name is Julie Turner. I'm married to Mike Turner, David Turner's sister-in-law. I have a question and a comment. My question is, and I'm gonna ask my question and make my comment, and then I'll sit down and somebody can answer my question for me, please. Could someone here please explain the required notification process by which the county has to notify landowners when you are making these sorts of plans and voting on plans on our personal property? I do not think it's fair that as property owners, we are required to send notices to every adjoining property owner and post public notices and signs and have public hearings. But the county can vote and make decisions on our property without notifying us personally by mail or other means. Our family is one of the largest property owners in the county and no doubt pays a large part of the taxes of this county, which we willingly do. No one in our family was notified about this, nor were we invited to participate in any of the meetings that have taken place before this. I know we're supposed to watch the meetings and try to keep up with everything, but unfortunately, we can't do that all the time between the city of Dawsonville and Dawson County. We should have done a better job. But we own 600 acres on the 53 overlay. So I feel like we should have some say-so in the decision. We find it offensive and frustrating to hear and look at plans that other people make for our property who do not own our land and who do not pay our taxes. This is my question and my public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we have public hearings obviously for a reason, to give people, to give people an opportunity to come and tell us, what they think. Public hearings are advertised in the legal Oregon. They have to be advertised in that. So we put those out. Like I say, there were several meetings associated with this as well. And anytime we had surveys and stuff like that, that was put out as well. Do we call every single person and send them a note? Probably not. And hopefully we can do better in reference to, getting information out. We have a website that has a lot of information on it that we put on it every day. We hired a young lady to make sure that that information is updated on a regular basis, and she's doing an outstanding job providing that. So we would ask, in reference to that, we'd ask you to follow and look at our website. You can follow along and find out the meetings as well as everything that's going on in Dawson County. Now, that may not answer your question and that may not satisfy you, but we follow all the legal requirements to putting out information. So we'll go ahead and continue this hearing. Is anyone else who wants to speak on the Georgia 400 Highway 53 corridor guidelines? Anyone else? Come on up.
Mark, I've been here for 68 years. But, no, I'd just like to know the list of people that you did ask as business owners, 53. I'd like y'all to get me a list up. And then I hate we've spent our tax paid money on this kind of survey. I hear what you said, Billy, but I'm just saying. I mean, I don't look at the internet that much, but I mean, you know, my business has been there 20 something years and I should have got a letter on this. And then, okay, she says something about sidewalks. Okay, that'd be like killing people in Chicago. You put sidewalks on 53. Okay, and the trees, okay, all this tree stuff is, I won't point out nobody in the audience, but he's here. But you got trees down at the shopping center. You can't even see to turn at the Walmart. I went in there yesterday. Almost got hit because the trees are so low and they're so big. You can't even turn to get out back into the street to get to the parking in Walmart. Okay. I got some notes. Y'all just got to bear with me. I'm no public speaker neither. Okay. The cost of these buildings that she's showing. I mean, you might can do that in Rawlsville, Alpharetta, Johns Creek, but you can't do that in Dawson County and get and live and make a living. And like I said, I would love to see all 5 of y'all go down there to the shopping centers and see where these big trees are I'm talking about. And just look at the leaves and all that everybody wants trees. And I ain't got nothing wrong with trees. It's just we can overdo something and it's been overdone. If you go to Walmart, is one of them, is the worst one. And okay, signs. She says she wants to get us off the road, but then you don't want us to put up no signs. So how are we going to advertise our business? I'm just going on her comments that she made, that I made notes. And then, yeah, the who did they invite to this meeting? Why did it start in 2019 when we're under the Corona thing, or right after that? And then, why wasn't this thing put on hold and let it be public hearings? Like, I mean, they should have been public hearings or just meetings on this of local business people. Now, you're a businessman. All of you are. So you see where I'm going? Okay. I don't want to be stuttering too much and I don't want to take 5 minutes. I see other notes. Yeah. And then 53, where are you talking about building all this? I mean, most people's got houses and got their little land. And I know the Turners has got a lot of land on 53, but where are you going to build this that she's showing pictures of? Okay, let me put the name back. And I apologize if I've said something out of the way.
Thank you.
Appreciate you listening.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak on the Georgia 4? Come on up. Wait a minute, Jimmy, let him go first, if you will. Give us your name and your address, and you'll have 5 minutes.
All right, Paul Mincy, 5711 Highway 53. Been doing business here for, as y'all know, a long time. As far as my business and any new buildings I want to build, I want to make it real attractive. But I don't want somebody coming with the, oh, this window's got to be an extra 2 inches or crap like that, you know? If I want, but one of the great things about this area is the rural lifestyle. If I wanted to live like Johns Creek, I'd move Johns Creek. But, you know, I appreciate everything, and I wasn't notified either about a survey or anything else. All right, I'm done.
Thank you. Next. Anyone else? Come on up, Jimmy. Please sign in, please. Your name and your address.
Jimmy Hammond. I would like to give you a little history, I think, maybe on this thing. Commissioner Satterfield was involved in this. This overlay was talked about in 16, 17, Tim, when we talked about the mosquitoes in the tires.
Oh, that's our ordinance, yeah.
Okay,
I just fixed that. I know what you're.
This
talking
is
about.
when- this is
I was
when the-
involved in, because I've never been involved in the ordinance before.
well, I know you wasn't. I'm talking about when
The tires.
the tires and
Yes,
the mosquito problem, which was a health problem, right?
Yep.
Okay. So the overlay was talked about then, and we were approaching it as a health issue, keeping things healthy for the people going in buy tires and things like that. And this thing seems to have grown into a whole lot more than a health issue. Is any of this that's been talked about tonight unhealthy? That would be my question. I think the reason I'm here, a resident called me and asked me would I come. I don't have a dog in this fight other than them, but I still have the residents of Dawson County as a part of my life. And I just think we need to think real hard about getting in people's yards. And that's what we're doing when we go to telling them, I mean, we got order, y'all are of the board and y'all can decide how a building needs to look and what needs to go out in front of it without any of these ordinances. That's y'all's job, as I see it. I mean, not second guessing anybody, not mad about anything. I'm just saying, y'all need to make those decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else speak on the Georgia 400 Highway 53 corridor guideline? Come on up, give us your name and your address, and please sign in. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Commissioner Thurman. Grady Turner, 2599 Hazard Mill Road. I'm one of the young ones. I've only lived here 62 years. And I know most of you on the board. I just have a couple of comments. And my perspective may be a little bit different than some others. Property owner, I was not contacted. And what probably bothered me is when the gentleman got up and he spoke, he said, we contacted large property owners. Well, they didn't contact the largest one on 53. And I don't know, I've served on a lot of committees. I retired for 30 years of teaching. And that 30 years of teaching, I served on a lot of committees. And we always tried to talk with the people who were impacted the most. Seems to me that the larger property owners, all of them should have been contacted, but they weren't. One of the things that bothers me about this proposal is two things. One, setting a percentage of 40% windows. Windows are more expensive than walls. When you're putting that kind of a restriction on a building, you're making it, the construction costs go way up. Y'all know that because y'all built things in the county. Second thing is, Marcia, you talked about you like the planning director to have some discretion. Well,
I'm Sharon.
I mean, Sharon, I'm sorry.
Now,
Sharon.
listen, I'm not gonna get mad at you,
I'm
but it's gonna
sorry.
take great restraint.
Yes, I understand. I worked with Marcia though so I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Okay.
Sharon, but here's the problem with discretion. You can't carry the rule book in your head. And discretion means that today I want this, tomorrow I want that. You can't build with that kind of a rule. The rules must be in black and white so there's no discretion, because discretion is arbitrary. I promise you, my wife would think that my choice for building certain things, I don't have a whole lot of taste, but she's got a great amount of taste. And that's probably the truth. So, you know, whatever happens on this, And I think it needs to be, and I understand the reason for it. Protection of property factors, protection of growth. I understand the reasons for it. But it should be the least restrictive as possible with everything delineated as much as possible without micromanaging and allowing for choice. So, because otherwise what happens is you prevent people from being able to build. Now, my family's lived here their whole lives. All we've ever done is pay our property tax. We have never developed anything other than the first subdivision that we developed at Allen Street. We pay a lot of property tax. We don't have a lot of money. I don't care what people say. We ain't got a lot of money. So we have to sell property to pay for the property tax or develop it. So we want to do that. And we want to do it in a manner that helps Dawson County, not hurts. But you can make your restrictions such that it's detrimental to development. And when that occurs, property gets sold to people that we don't want it to sell to, maybe, and development comes in a manner that we don't want. So I'm just, whatever you do on it, make sure that you stipulate it. Don't leave it to be arbitrary and make it as least restrictive as possible. And anytime in the future that you do something, contact the property owners. Don't be arbitrary. Contact them. If you're gonna try to do guidelines that control what they do, contact them. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak on the Georgia 400 Highway 53 corridor guidelines? Come on up. Ask you to give us your name and address one more time and sign in, please, and you'll have 5 minutes.
Do I need to sign in again? I signed in
It's a
previously.
different
Okay,
hearing.
all right. I'll do that before I leave, but while I got my mind on track, if you wouldn't mind.
Go ahead.
And if he had said that in school, your mama would have hit him with a ruler.
That's
okay?
right, right.
And he wouldn't have made that mistake again. I had the good fortune of having her mother for my English teacher, and she taught me how to diagram sentence. But I never could punctuate and spell. Anyway, I know most of you. I appreciate what you do for the county. I don't always agree with you. Sometimes I sit there and read about things and you know, think bad thoughts, okay, and go, why are they doing that? But anyway, just so you know, I'm human. So if I say anything that offends you, I don't mean it personally, okay? But I do feel passionate about this place. Unfortunately, I can't say I lived here 68 years. I started off here a long time ago in the 50s and couldn't make a living here. And mama didn't want me driving up and down the roads to Atlanta and dying like so many young boys did in Dawson County, commuting to different places, trying to make a living and feed their family. So I moved away where I could do my business, which is development and building. Okay, that's the business I'm in. And that's what I want to talk about. And I want to talk about what this lady's proposing. First off, I'm going to say my piece about participation. I have no problem getting the notices of evaluations or tax bills from this county. They all come regularly and they get right to me. There's never a problem with that. But I didn't get any kind of survey. I got no kind of, I didn't get a postcard. I didn't get anything. And I know if I come ask for a zoning, I got to write every single property owner that anywhere close touches me across the road might be influenced. I got to cross every T and dot every I to make sure everybody knows what I'm doing. If I miss something, I got to go back to the beginning and start over. Well, you know, the county ought to have some kind of standard when it comes to something as serious as telling me what I'm going to have to do with my property. You know, this is America. If I wanted a central planned economy, I wouldn't call y'all commissioner. I'd call you comrade and commissar. Okay. And that's what you're proposing here is by telling me, the private property owner, and taking my rights away, what I'm going to have to do on this property. Well, I'm a free market person. I let the market tell me what to do. And I try to put things out to the lowest common denominator from a market triangle perspective so that I serve those that need housing the most. And that's policemen, firemen, teachers, service workers, county employees. They need housing in this country, and they need it here in Dawson County. Our policemen don't need to have to go to Dahlonega, or we don't need to have to see people from Forsyth County or Fulton County or Hall County have to come here to get housing because they can't afford it where they work. So we got to be sure that we do things that promote that. Now, this lady talked about limiting grading. Well, we're in the mountains. We got topography, okay? And we got differential, and we also got gold mining property here. Most of the property here was hydraulically gold mined. So we got tremendous slope variations, and we have to do grading to get a big enough flat spot so we can put a house. And that adds cost. And we've got building codes, and those building codes tell us how we build our structures for life safety and how they need to be done so we can live in them. And we've got energy codes. Those tell us how we have to build our buildings so they're efficient. And they specifically talk about how we limit the windows and not make the windows 40%. And I hope we're not going to get like I have to do in Forsyth County. If I don't have a window in the end of my house in Forsyth County, I got to put a fake window in so it looks like a window. And I hope we're not going to get to the point where this county's telling me what kind of doorknob that I got to put on my house. The other thing I want to talk about is the cost involved in doing this. There's certainly a tremendous cost and burden in the development codes, in the zoning codes, and in the building codes. That's already there in this county. Now we're going to add another whole layer of approval and cost on this. And many of those pictures, I recognized a lot of those projects, but those homes cost $800,000, $1 million. Those developments are very high dollar. And that's just not Dawson County. And that's not where we are. That's not the people that this county has living here as residents and that we need to be serving. And in closing, the last thing I will say to you is as a property owner, I should have a say-so in my property, and I object to this overlay zone. I object to my property being in it. This overlay took property that I own all the way up to Frank Bruce Road, which is nowhere close to Highway 53. So I would respectfully ask this group to take the Turner property out of this overlay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak on the Georgia 400 Highway 53 corridor guideline? Anyone else? All right, seeing none, I'll close this hearing. What is the pleasure of the board?
I'll make a motion that we table the decision on this until we have more time to digest it and gather some additional feedback from some property owners and other citizens.
Time frame?
I don't have a time frame on it until,
Indefinitely.
yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
Second.
A motion to table indefinitely till we get feedback from landowners. Have a second. Discussion. Hearing none, please vote. And that's approved 4-0, and it is tabled. Okay, we'll move on to the zoning that we have tonight. We have ZA 2114, Jim King request to rezone tax map parcel 113-044 from commercial highway business to CIR, commercial industrial restricted for the purpose of developing an office warehouse. We go over the rules that we'll go by before we actually start the zoning process. First, we'll hear from the planning director, then we'll hear from the applicant. Then I'll open the hearing. We'll hear for those that are in favor of the application. We'll hear from those that are in opposition to the application. Anyone wishing to speak will have 3 minutes. Our zoning ordinances allow 3 minutes of speaking per person. Also, anyone who has donated $250 or more to any candidate must fill out a document stating so. So with that, Jameson, we're going to take all of this together because these variances are associated with the same zoning.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and I'll just go over that. VR 2110, Jim King requests to vary from Dawson County Land Use Resolution Article 4, Section 400A with a front setback reduction, and VR 2111, Jim King requests to vary from the Dawson County Land Use Resolution Article 6, Section 607.1.a for the reduction in the minimum parking requirements. James.
Thank you, Chairman. So the applicant has requested to rezone parcel 113-044 to commercial industrial restriction in order to develop a warehouse and office warehouse space on 9.15 acres, approximately 1 mile north of 53 on Lumpkin Campground North. The applicant is requesting a reduction of the setback from city 60 to 40 feet and at the cost of dedicating 20 foot of additional right of way to Lumpkin Campground. The proposed development does not generate public traffic, but employees only. So they are asking for a reduction of the minimum parking spaces from one to every 500 square feet to 1 to every 2,000 square feet. Planning and development doesn't see any issues with this. We did not receive any comments back from any departments when we sent out our interdepartmental forms. But during planning commission, we did receive interest from one of the planning commissioners to reach back out to engineering, which we did, to discuss the building setback to be of being only 20 feet after the variance and the dedication of the additional right of way. I believe the applicant and Public Works has discussed that, and I'll let the applicant speak more to that. This is an appropriate use for this area and commercial industrial up and down in the 400 corridor. They will have to meet all of the 400 corridor guidelines as currently stated at the time. And at this time, I will entertain any questions.
Questions for James? The Planning Commission recommended approval.
Yes, sir.
Now, explain to me why it had to be changed from CHB to CIR.
So currently, there's no industrial, because you're bringing in big trucks. You're going to have a bay, trucking bay, office warehouse space. Does no longer fits in commercial highway business. It is more appropriate for it to be a commercial industrial use.
Which there was a change in our prior, the way it used to be zoned, it was applicable. And then when we did our zoning changes and added some other designations, I think, is my understanding. it
We added
changed.
some.
Exactly. In 2000, we kind of made that more defined, right? In early 2000, we had commercial highway business was extremely broad, and anywhere from your mom and pop shops to, some office warehousing. So we tried to divide that up into commercial highway business and be more specific as what is in commercial highway business, what's in commercial highway intensive, and commercial industrial. And we feel like what the applicant is wanting to do fits best in the industrial, which is also an appropriate use for that area.
Other questions for James? Thank you, sir. We may have some more later. Applicant present. Come on up and please tell us what you would like to do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Jim King, 131 Prominence Court, Suite 230, Dawsonville, Georgia. Here tonight. What we're planning to do is build a warehouse building to serve one of the existing businesses in Dawson that's expanding, and they just need storage space. As Commissioner Gaines just alluded to, up until a year ago, this use would have been permitted in the existing zoning, but a countywide zoning ordinance change, you adopted a new zoning ordinance of CIR, which took all the warehouse uses out of CHB and put them in CIR. So that's forcing us to go back now and rezone in order to allow a use that used to be permitted. It is, we're asking for two variances. We are dedicating 20 feet of right of way along the entire frontage along Lumpkin Campground Road, 20 feet of right of way to the county. There's an existing 80 feet there. I think engineering's concerns were, or what they expressed to me was the clear zone which is typically required on a state highway. And that's their clear zone. What they were referring to was if there's no curb and gutter, it's just a pavement, and then you got a ditch and then the slopes going up. And we are adding a decel lane along the frontage of our property with the curb and gutter, which will, that keeps cars from, they'd have to jump the curb before they could go through. So, we're adding additional safety measures. Again, what we're asking for right now, as we're proposing, our building would be approximately 80 feet from the center line of Lumpkin Campground Road. Ms. Stevens' house across the street is only 50 feet from the center line of Lumpkin Campground Road, so it's 30 feet closer. Also, Dr. Canaro's office right there at the corner is only 60 feet from the center. So we're, a good 20, 30 feet further than any other structure along the road. So we feel like it's justified. And because we are pushing our parking to the back of the building, we're sliding our building forward, pushing the loading zones so that the current, what we're trying to do is keep the loading dock doors from facing the highway and the truck loading docks from facing the road. We're trying to hide them in the rear to give you a much nicer view as you're driving down Lumpkin Campground instead of looking at a truck court. That's it.
Questions of the applicant? Okay, think we may have some later. All right, this time I'll open up this hearing. Anyone here to speak in favor of the application? This is a little different from the last public hearing. Anyone here to speak in favor of the application? Anyone here? Okay. Anyone here to speak in opposition to the application? Anyone here to speak in opposition to the application? Seeing none, I'll close that hearing. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to recuse myself from voting. My neighbor is actually buying this property and building a building, so I'm gonna just recuse myself from voting.
Okay.
Mr. Sharon, did you say you wanted the motion to include the variances as well? Did I hear
Yes,
that?
we're taking them all together. If that's what you so desire to do. But we're listening to all of it together and we'll.
Okay.
we
I
can-
make a motion that we approve the rezoning of ZA 21-14 as well as the variances VR 21-10 and VR 21-11.
Motion for approval. Do I have a second? Second. Motion by Commissioner Fawcett, seconded by Commissioner Gaines. Discussion. Hearing none, please vote. That is approved. 3-4 and 1 abstention. Okay. We'll move on to new business. First up, we have consideration of requests for Sheriff's Office staffing, recruitment, and retention funding. Sheriff Johnson presented to the board a couple of weeks ago the situation that he currently is in, to where he's having difficulty filling positions. He provided us with data and information from surrounding counties that shows the difference in the salaries and how that makes it more difficult for him to be able to recruit and retain employees. So a lot of times he's training them and somebody else is getting them. And so his goal, as well as ours here on the board, is to try to stop that from happening and provide him with a staff that is better for our citizens. A trained staff and some people who've been here a long term is much better than him having to have somebody new every time you turn around. So he made a request, and in his request, he talked about his 104 officer positions. And his officers, if you don't know, work 12-hour shifts, and he's talking about his detention officers. He's talking about his multiple divisions that he has, CID, patrol, sheriff services here in the courthouse. He has people at the school resource officers. So he has a large number of officers spread throughout in different areas and different divisions. So that encompasses the 104 officers that he had made a request for. And his request was for $3 an hour raise, which would still not bring them up to what some of our surrounding counties are beginning their officers with, but it would make us very competitive. And I'm glad to say that even talking about it, the sheriff started to get a few phone calls. We hadn't even done anything, but just talk. And so that started to help a little bit. Now, we had made some changes earlier in the year because our fire chief, Mr. Danny Thompson, had come forward in reference to the same problem that he had with firefighter paramedics and trying to maintain a staff, and had gone for 18 months or so with 6 vacancies or more, which is not good for our citizens. We want the most highly trained people possible when they need it. So we made some adjustments then. We did a 15% increase, and we also did $2 an hour for those people who ride, those paramedics who ride the med unit. Now, I know the sheriff made the request only for the 104 officers, but I'm going to propose to you a little bit different and add a few into it, because I think we have a need to fix as many problems as we can at the same time. And I'm going to propose to you a method by which to do that as well. All right. We have our E911 officers who are also under the direction of the sheriff. And as I stated 2 weeks ago, they are an essential element to not only our citizens, but to the survival of our people who work the front lines. So I'm going to propose to you a $2 an hour pay increase for our 911 officers as well. And there's 14 of those. Also, when we did the firefighter paramedic, we did not do anything for firefighter EMT. I'm going to propose to you tonight that we do $2 an hour increase for the firefighter EMT as well. Now, on an annual basis, that comes to $1,334,503.31. Now, you ask, how are we going to pay for it? The ARPA, which is the American Rescue Plan Act, which is the money that was approved by Congress, whether you agreed with it or not, is almost $5.1 million that the county received. We can use that money to pay for our law enforcement and our firefighters and our 911 operators, to give them a pay raise that allows us the opportunity to keep those positions filled and allows us to have the opportunity to protect our citizens at the highest level. Now, these raises that I'm proposing to you, or these numbers that I'm proposing to you, does not make us the highest paid county of all the counties around us. It does make us competitive. It allows us the opportunity to keep the people that we have. So with this money, we can pay, and money is good you can spend this money up until December of 2024. And with this approximately $5.1 million, we'll be able to pay this increase over the next 3 years to our officers, our 911 and our firefighter EMTs, as well as our firefighter paramedic, because I am requesting or asking the board to roll what we gave them into this in as well, because we have to use this money between now and then. Now, one other department that we have trouble maintaining a staff and keeping going, and they're very important, and they're also, even though most people might not think so, also part of public safety, and that's our Public Works Department. We have 17 people that are out on the street, 17 people that are in our Public Works Department. And I'm proposing that we give them a $2 an hour raise with this ARPA funding. And we're dividing that out over a three-year period plus the remainder of this year. And that would bring the total of that funding and leaving us about $390,811 that we can also do something with. Now, there were only 3 or 4 categories that we could actually spend this money on. It provides us with the opportunity to make ourselves competitive in the job market. And I've worked for this county my whole life, so I can tell you that being competitive is how you get employees. They will come and go if you're not competitive, and you're spending a whole lot of money as a taxpayer trying to recruit and retrain new people every time you turn around. We want to keep what we got. That'll allow us to maintain a stable workforce. The ARPA funds gives us a funding mechanism for this increases through 2024. That gives us time to see increases in revenue to cover those costs going forward. It also gives the board a chance to take care of all of our other employees who also have done a good job through the budget process. And so, Sheriff, you want to add anything to what I said? All right. So those are the, he only started out with his law enforcement officers, but I've added to that, and I would request that you add those in if that be the desire of your motion, and that would be a methodology by which to fund it. Any other information needed? Motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to use funds out of the American Rescue Plan Act to fund the 104 officers, $3 an hour raise, 911, $2, firefighter EMTs, $2, roll in the 15% and the 2 hour for the $2 an hour per med unit when they ride. That's $313,660. And also Public Works, $2 an hour with 17 employees.
Motion by Commissioner Satterfield.
Effective
Effective
date.
we talked about that, so that'd be what, 8 paydays left in this month, so for the final 8 paydays of this year, and then going forward over the next 3 years. If we can make that happen.
September,
No, not this, yeah,
September 1st.
first,
would be-
next first full payday.
I would like to clarify something. I'm not getting more or less every 3 years. That,
Don't say that.
Don't say, it.
but,
I've already told you that.
that there is a limit on the amount.
Yes.
Right.
Per salary.
Mhm.
78,
Yeah, 79,000.
79,000 total.
Mhm.
So
it's 24
whatever
one year.
is above that amount. for
Can't go over 24
25
a year.
years, That'll have to be absorbed by general fund.
Right.
Right.
So, with overtime, and the extra amount that, so that means general fund will have to absorb it. I just want that to be clear.
Yeah.
for the record.
I don't think we'll have too many of those
I don't
because
think we'll have too
we're
many.
not exactly overpaying some of them.
Doesn't include benefits or anything like
No.
that, I assume.
No, this is salary.
It's 25 a year and 78 for total.
25,000 is the maximum amount that any person could
Can get.
receive. And so that would, even over a 3-year period, I think it averaged out to about 6,000 something a year on an average. So that wouldn't get up to the 25. Yeah. So we would have to look at those individually. Okay. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please vote. And that is approved 4-0.
Thank y'all.
Thank you for what you do. Thank your people. All right, we'll move on to item number 2 under new business, consideration of 2021 charity boot drives. Chief Thompson brought that up to us a couple of weeks ago. Due to the increase or another sudden increase in the COVID outbreak that he and his team are having to deal with, he's requesting that we cancel that at this moment or vote not to do it at this time.
So move, I guess.
Can we not do it virtual like we did last time?
Come on up.
Yeah, we made a whopping, what did we make? A whopping virtual?
Was it?
Yeah, virtual was okay. It was
Oh, I can tell by looking at you, it was not okay.
$1,000 or so. So, there were some limitations with virtual. So the board can approve the boot drives as is, and we can internally just based on the current COVID climate, just decide to postpone if that's the choice and if it makes it a little cleaner for you all, or we can remove it. I'll leave the choice up to you. It's, it's hard to predict what the November is going to look
Hard to
like, and that's in there, so we can approve it and just give me the ability to postpone it as I see fit based on the current COVID, because if November's good, we're back down with numbers. I'd love to be able to do it. And what we can do is split that day. We can do one day that will benefit the Burn Foundation and one day that will benefit Care for Kids. So just something to consider for the board.
So just approve it, but leave the dates up to
Leave the
you.
dates approved, as
the same-
presented
oh,
at the
same
work
day.
session. Go ahead and approve it
Give him
as
the
is.
option to change it.
And then
Yeah, he could change it.
I'll have the ability as to say, we're just going to postpone.
We have to
to
decide
September.
whether he's qualified or not to change the date.
I can't decide that. I'm gonna table that.
Just,
indefinitely.
Chief, you can notify.
Yeah.
If the chief can notify the county manager and he just sent us a
Yeah.
An email.
Yeah.
email.
That'll work.
And make sure
Well,
it's
yes.
online.
Yes.
She'll handle it. What's the pleasure of the board?
Make a motion to give Danny the ability to make changes to the schedule as needed.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Gaines,
Second.
second by Commissioner Dooley. Discussion. Hearing none, please vote. And that's approved 4-0. Next up, we have consideration of rural fire defense agreement memorandum of understanding with the Georgia Forestry Commission. Chief Thompson presented that. Basically, all this is they changed leadership, so they had to have a new signature, which means we have to re-sign. Any other information needed? Motions.
Make a motion to approve.
Motion by Commissioner Fawcett,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Satterfield. Discussion. Hearing none, please vote. And that is approved 4-0. Next up, we have consideration of IFB 384-21 culvert renovation projects for Dawson County. Denise presented that to us a couple of weeks ago. What was that total?
109,000.
Yes, 19.
Oh, I had it. I know it's 109,000 something.
Culvert project,
$109,031.
yeah,
Perform task 1A and 2, and then Public Works would perform task 1B and task 3.
And use SPOS 6 funds. Is that correct?
Yes. Any other information needed? Motions.
Motion to approve.
Motion by Commissioner Satterfield. Second by Commissioner Gaines. Discussion.
So we don't have to read all, I mean, put all this, where you accept bids for 1A and 2?
No.
And reject bids 1B. Okay, all right, forget it. Okay,
That's how they present
except
it.
in the
Okay.
presentation. the way
That's
they
how they
presented it.
okay, all right.
All right. Any further discussion? Hearing none, please vote. And that's approved 4-0. Next up, we have consideration request for additional funding for legal costs. I believe that was an additional $200,000 that Vicky presented for legal costs.
250.
250,000. And that would come from fund balance. Any other information needed? Motions.
Motion to approve increasing that line item $250,000.
Motion by Commissioner Gaines,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Fawcett. Discussion. Hearing none, please vote. And that is approved 4-0. Next up, we have consideration of special purpose local option sales tax 6 overage allocation. That was presented a couple of weeks ago. What I would propose to you as a board is that we would table this until we look at the capital requests that are in our 2022 budget request. There's a lot of these capital items that I've looked at through just looking at it just temporarily could fall under SPOS 6 in the categories that we already have, and it would provide us a method of funding some of those capital projects that are in the most need. So I would, at this time, it would be my suggestion to you that we table this until after we get through the budget process and then revisit. What say you?
Make a motion, we table allocating the remaining splosh funds till after budget process.
Motion by Commissioner Gaines,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Commissioner Satterfield.
It's late.
Discussion. Hearing none, please vote. And that is tabled 4-0. Next up, we have consideration of hotel motel tax ordinance update. This vote would be to move to a public hearing. What's the pleasure of the board?
Make a motion to move to public hearing for the hotel motel tax ordinance update.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Dooley,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Fawcett. Discussion. Hearing none, please vote. And that's approved 4-0. So that will move to a public hearing. Do we have a date for that yet? September 16th. All right, move on down. Number 8, uses of American Rescue Plan funding. I think I've already got y'all to spend the majority of that when we were talking a few minutes ago, but we do have, if my numbers are correct, and we will verify all this through Vicky before, about $390,811. So we could take a little time. When David made some presentations, we could take a little time there and table that as well till we get the exact numbers and everything else. I think I'm pretty close, and with Vicky's help, I would say I'm really close because she's good with numbers. So I would say that would probably not be a bad plan to table the remainder of that money till we get exact numbers on the other. We'll know exactly what we've got to work with.
What date? Don't we have a date on that? August or something, we got it August 31st.
Do we have to make all the allocation by August 31st? Okay. So if we did,
Use it for COVID relief. That's the way they put it to us, which is extremely broad. So
yes, sir.
Oh, yeah, we did talk about something earlier.
There was the, payments taken
Right.
care of people that are sick, positive tests. So I guess we could say COVID positive test,
So them taking their own
if that's what
time,
y'all want to do.
which some of them don't have any time.
Mr. Chairman, if I could really shed a little light on that. You know, this week, my department over the weekend has been hit pretty significantly with the COVID virus. And I have two of those employees that, thankful to you all for raises, were new employees, but they only had about 33 hours of time on the books. They were new employees and they're out for 14 days. For us, that equates to 96 hours. So I have 2 or 3 employees who's not going to get a full check. And working with Mr. Headley, I really started pushing this hard. I encourage you, please, because it's tough for these men and women to not have funds in the bank. And this is something, and we really narrowed the scope and we talked about it with senior staff. I talked about it with every department head. I reached out to a few of the elected officials to kind of garner support to move this thing to you guys tonight to be able to make a decision, but really we narrowed it to that positive test and not a quarantine status. So just so we were aware of that.
The
But I
board
really,
can-
really need that.
So, okay, does the board want to, like she said, we can be broad, we're gonna put the rest of it in that for now. All right, so what's the motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to the remaining funds to be put in a COVID relief,
COVID-19
COVID-19 relief.
positive test
Positive
relief
test.
fund.
$300,000.
So you want 100 in there?
Can we be that broad and then go back and do something? We just say that broadly? Okay, so let's go with that.
To be broad, just put 100,000 in
Well,
there.
just, well, no, I mean, as far as,
I thought you was gonna do the whole thing. and
we
put
go
it under
broadly and
this.
put all of it in there and then make some, will they be fine with that?
I think what I would do is I would say that part of it
Okay,
is for pre pay, and then 100,000 for the COVID relief
okay,
for employees.
so
and
premium
then
pay and
the
COVID
remainder of
relief.
it, we can call it
That's what we did just now.
Yeah, we'll still have a balance.
Yeah, for that.
That's it.
But we're still cool to have a balance that we have yet to allocate.
That's right. So let's go with those two categories. Let's go with
So
those
I'd
two
like to amend
categories.
my motion to go $100,000 for the COVID relief,
Well, that been second, so you can just withdraw it and start.
withdraw it then.
Okay,
My motion would be use the remaining balance of
100,000.
100,000 to COVID relief fund.
And the
And
other
then the
would be
remaining would be the premium pay.
premium. All right. Motion by.
So
Commissioner-
these people would get paid that are out.
Yes. Motion by Commissioner Satterfield,
Second.
second by Commissioner Dooley. Discussion. Hearing none, please vote. And that is approved 4-0. Next up, we've had requests for letters of support from Etowah Water and Sewer Authority, from LJ Telephone Company, which is ETC, as well as Windstream. All of these entities are eligible to apply for grants through the state, through some of the COVID funding that the state got. And so they had asked that the county provide them with letters of support, which doesn't bind us to any financial holding, but always looks good in a application packet that you're working together. So I would ask that you support us, me signing letters of support for all of these 3 agencies. Motion. Yeah, we'll vote it in official.
Okay, I make a motion that we do these letters of support to Windstream, Etowah, and ETC and give you permission to sign.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Fawcett,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Gaines. Discussion. Hearing none, please vote. And that is approved 4-0. No one signed up for public comment in this section. Yes,
I didn't sign up for public comment. My name's Mike Turner again, but you stimulated me with your broad proposal for the pay. And I thought of an idea that I've done in other areas that I thought I ought to just say it to this board. You know, one of the ways to cement solidity in your service workers, your firemen, your policemen, your teachers, is to have great low-cost housing for them. And we call it workforce housing. And we've done that in other areas. And I don't know if this county's ever investigated that, but that would be a great venture for you to look at. Because if a deputy sheriff lives here in Dawsonville, he's not going to think too much about driving 40 miles to somewhere else to work, you know, and he might even work for $1 less. And the same way with everybody else. So it's just something to look at. And if you can cut the cost of the sewer and the water and the impact fees and the development cost with all the burdensome regulation, you know, you might have that house at a really reasonable price for those folks. And it'd be a win-win. And I even know some folks that have some property close by in the area. So I don't know how you start that kind of thing, but hey, I thought that came from you doing what you did there, Billy. Thank you.
I believe we've
Thank
heard
you.
that term, haven't
we have.
I believe we've heard that, Mike.
Thank you. All right. And with that, we are adjourned.